Oh, what? Oh, hey. How's it? Yeah, no, I just got back from burying my pet out in that like creepy area down past the old pet cemetery. Yeah, I mean they spelled what? What'd you say? What? What do you mean? Sometimes dead is better. I get it, but like, whoa, what the? Oh, ooh, you really got me there, fishy.
I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Uh huh.
You're ugly, lazy, and I fucking hate you.
Wow, what a normal thing for you to say. Hello, ladies, germs, and everyone else. Welcome to my video. So today I'm gonna be talking about every single Pet Sematary movie because, well, I decided to watch them all. There's four of them, in case you're wondering. I guess we gotta get started somehow, and that's with
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror, Pet Sematary.
All right, so the original Pet Sematary from 1989 was directed by Mary Lambert and written by Stephen King himself. Yes, that's right. Stephen King is the original author of the novel Pet Sematary, as you probably know, but he actually wrote the screenplay for this movie, and I think that's kind of a detriment at points. Needless to say, I don't think he is as skilled in writing screenplays, in writing movies. So it's not always perfect. The plot is sometimes a little all over the place and disjointed. It reminded me of the one and only movie he's ever directed, Maximum Overdrive, where it just feels a little disconnected and, well, I don't know. I can tell that with Pet Sematary, he's really trying to adapt the book, which can be a good thing. But the problem is also that books don't always neatly and perfectly adapt into a movie. So there are some faults here. I'm not going to call it out too terribly because it's whatever, it's okay. But ultimately, spoiler alert, I didn't necessarily think any of the Pet Sematary movies were that great. I don't think they're bad necessarily. I just don't, they're not like the best ever, you know what I'm saying? So, first of all, the general rundown of the plot of Pet Sematary is the family moves to Ludlow, Maine, and one of them's a dad who is a doctor. He has a wife named Rachel. Oh, the dad's name is Lewis. The wife's name is Rachel. She's there. I don't know. She's there. At least in this movie, she doesn't do a whole lot. And they have two children. They have Ellie and Gage, and a cat named Church, named after Winston Churchill. For why? I really couldn't tell you. But I will say that Church is portrayed wonderfully by several beautiful, lovely little cat actors. I believe in total there were 7 actors that played Church. And from what I saw, each of them were kind of trained to do individual things. Like one would be specifically trained for hissing and jumping and stuff like that. So they could get different cats to do different actions, but all still play the same character of Church. Well, so the point of Pet Sematary is if you go past the Pet Cemetery into a burial grounds and you bury your own in said grounds, the thing, creature, animal, person that you buried will come back. Most of the times, all of the times, not in a good way. So Church ends up dying because they live on this main road that has these Orinco trucks, basically 16 wheelers or whatever, just constantly driving by. And one day, Church is found, well, dead. So Daddy Dearest gets taught the ways of the Pet Cemetery by their neighbor Judd. Judd has lived here his whole life. He knows what is capable of what this place is capable of, and they bring Church back to life. But eventually, Church being brought back, kind of evil kitty now, is also later put down for good by Daddy Lewis. What blew my mind is I was watching this, and I'm watching as Church is put to sleep, and it looked so real that I was like, now hold on a moment. Did they actually sedate this cat? They did. They fucking actually sedated a cat. They did it safely. I guess the Berkshire Humane Society was there at times to make sure everything was handled humanely, but it blew my mind that they actually sedated a freaking cat for this. So there's your fun fact of the day, I guess, for this movie. To talk about the main things that stick out to me about Pet Sematary, the original, the acting is usually not great. By far, the absolute best actor is Fred Gwynne, or Gwynny, I don't know how you pronounce it, who played Judge, the neighbor. Now, Fred is mostly known for playing Herman Munster, I believe, and he does a phenomenal job. I love his accent in this movie. He has plenty, bountiful ayuts in there. It's just I love listening to him talk ayut, and I wish he was even around maybe a little bit more ayut. The guy who plays Lewis, the dad, Dale Midkiff, I mean, one could say hypothetically that me, Ryan, thought he did a bad job. Very not emotional at times, and the performance just kind of falls a little flat and a little empty. And it's a shame because Lewis is kind of basically the main character, and so when he falls flat, it's like, oh, yikes. The actor that played his wife, Lewis's wife, Rachel, Denise Crosby, I thought she did fairly good. I didn't have anything jump out to me that was like, oh, that was kind of a lackluster performance. I thought it was pretty good. I was pretty pleasantly surprised by how good the child actors were. Ellie, played by Blaze Burndahl, and Gage, played by Miko Hughes. They did really good. They were literal children, and they did pretty fantastically. There's also a ghost named Pascal. I forgot to mention Pascal. This is another one of those things where the plot is kind of all over the place and kind of disjointed. So Pascal is a student that is in an accident, and Pascal is brought to Lewis. Lewis tries to save Pascal. His whole freaking brain is showing on the side of his head. So believe it or not, Pascal passes away and becomes a ghost and tries to warn Lewis not to use the burial grounds. It's a whole thing, really. But really where it ends up being kind of weird is Pascal ends up communicating with the child, and the child is able to communicate this to the mother, and then the mother is like, oh no, I need to go help my husband. Honestly, I didn't mind it because it was something interesting, and sometimes this movie was not that interesting, but it definitely didn't feel like it fit in fully with the rest of the movie. And I also want to briefly touch on this burial ground thing that I keep talking about, because it's not handled very well. It's not a great trope to use, but let me explain things really quickly. There is a pet cemetery, which is where people bury their pets, believe it or not. It is spelled incorrectly. And beyond the pet cemetery is an Indian burial ground where the ground has turned sour, and so meaning if you bury something there, they'll come back, but they will come back not right. here's where it becomes a kind of not great trope. It is described that the place where they bury things and they come back with the soured ground is Indian burial grounds. I think specifically of the Micmac tribes. The thing with the Indian burial ground trope is that it's just a really not great stereotype. Like the thing is that it generalizes native culture into like this one thing. And there are so many different tribes and so many different cultures within the larger native culture. And so when it's kind of just boiled down into this one Indian burial ground, it's not great because it's just kind of like, oh, every tribe must do this. When in fact, not every tribe has burial grounds. Not every tribe does that. And the other thing about it is that it being specifically an Indian burial ground doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's basically saying there's something weird and spiritual and maybe even evil, because that's where the evil dead are coming from, about Native people, about Native Americans. It's weird. Burial grounds are all over the fucking place. Look at any cemetery in America where we literally bury the dead. White people bury the dead. What's different between a white people burial ground and a Native people burial ground? According to this, it's that it's weird, it's potentially evil. So that's why it's not a great trope. And I bring it up not to say, hey, if you like this movie, you're a fucking racist, you're a loser. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying, hey, it's good to be aware of these things because what's done is done, but we can reflect on it and say, oh, actually, I can see why that's not great. I think in this case, in the case of this franchise, it actually kind of helped pointing out this bad, negative stereotype trope, because we see in the latest movie that they actually kind of try to improve some things, which is what I want to see, which is what we should all want to see, is improvement. But like, I also do just find it weird that the title of the movie, of the book, of the story, Pet Sematary, isn't even the place where they bury the stuff, where they come back. My experience with this movie is certainly not all negative. I do like quite a few things about it. There's the scene where Gage gets hit by a truck and dies. That scene is genuinely very extremely tense and effective, and it is hard to watch. There's a lot of good stuff, especially towards the final act, I'll say, especially when Gage comes back after Lewis buries him. I'm not gonna lie to you. I found evil dead Gage a little bit funny because it is still very much a fucking child, a very small child that doesn't know how to act evil. They just kind of play him laughing, and it is unsettling, but it's also a little goofy because it is just a kid laughing, and you see him and he's doing like this little like pouty little baby face to to kind of appear angry and evil, and it's just really silly to me. There's a part where they switch to like an evil doll basically, and genuinely very terrifying, very creepy, but I think that overall the entire ending is very fun and very cool. So yeah, there's some good stuff. I think Church the cat is great. I think the idea behind the plot of like dealing with grief and having to do all these different things, or not wanting to let go, so you bring them to a place where they'll come back not who they were, so was it really worth it, and this and that whole thing, I think is very fun, and I really like the ending. It's a fine movie. I didn't super love it, but I didn't hate it. I think it's a pretty okay horror movie. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, sometimes it is, but overall, I wouldn't say it's bad.
Mom's dead, Jeff.
She doesn't have to be.
All right, now we get to talk about Pet Sematary 2 from 1992. This one's kind of special, y'all, and I'll explain why, but this is once again directed by Mary Lambert, only It is not written by Stephen King. I don't think Stephen King necessarily appreciated this movie. So it was in fact written by Richard Oughton. And the one thing I'll say generally about this movie is that it's a little batshit crazy. But in like the best way possible, actually. There's a kid named Jeff. He's played by the actor Edward Furlong, who played John Connor in Terminator 2. And his mom, who is an actress, dies on set. So he goes and moves in with his dad, Chase, played by Anthony Edwards. They move to Ludlow, Maine, what the hell? Near the Pet Sematary. So there's that. And then also there's a kid named Drew, played by Jason McGuire, and a stepdad named Gus, played by motherfucking Clancy Brown. Yeah, Mr. Krabs. That's the one. So basically, Clancy Brown plays Gus, and Gus is a sheriff, a cab. Gus is an abusive piece of shit. And then the plot just kind of, woo, but like in the best way. Here's what happens. Jeff's mama dies, and then Jeff moves to Ludlow, and then Jeff gets bullied because his mom died. I wish I were joking. That's genuinely what happens. Jeff gets bullied because his mom died. Maybe I am crazy, but I don't think bullies usually bully people for their parents dying. I guess Jeff kind of becomes friends with what's his name, Drew, and Drew has this certified good boy who is played by a husky mix. Again, sadly, these older movies, they don't really have much documentation on animal actors. But really good boy. And Sheriff Stepdad Gus doesn't like Drew's dog, Hendrix. That's the name of the dog, Hendrix. The dog gets excited about Gus's rabbits, which he has in a big cage, and upsets Gus. So Gus shoots Hendrix in front of Drew. I don't know what to say to you, man. Stepdad shoots son's dog because dog was minorly annoying him. I'm not fucking kidding. I'm not joking around. That's what happens. If you needed proof of Gus being an absolute piece of trash, there you go. Drew's very rightfully upset that his dog was just fucking killed by his stepdad. So he and Jeff go and bury the dog in the burial grounds past the pet cemetery. Dog comes back. Several things happen. Drew and Jeff experience Halloween. Gus comes, assaults Drew, and then dead dog come kill Gus. Kids decide, let's bury Gus so he come back for some fucking reason. I don't know why you would want this horribly abusive stepdad to come back. Let him be dead. And then Clancy Brown gets to play a dead guy, a dead little fucking creep. And Clancy Brown, let me tell you, by far the most enjoyable part of this movie. Absolutely crazy. I love his portrayal. Obviously, I hate the character, but Clancy Brown himself makes it really enjoyable to watch. Clancy Brown goes on a psycho spree. First of all, he kills the bully that was going after Jeff, and then Clancy buries the bully. Clancy goes after Drew and the mom and kills both of them by getting them run over by a truck full of potatoes. And then Clancy is for some reason helping Jeff. Clancy gets Jeff's mom out of the grave, brings her to the burial grounds. Jeff buries the mom. He goes back home. The mom kills the housekeeper. Oh yeah, there was a housekeeper. Jeff and Dad have a whole talk, kind of fight sort of thing. And then eventually everyone dies except for Jeff and Dad. That's Pet Sematary 2 in a nutshell for you. Like, I know I literally just kind of explained the plot to you, and that's it. But you have to understand that me doing that is because this is absurd. It's so absurd, and I actually love it. I think it's stupid, but I think it's fun. Sometimes I'd much rather have a stupid but fun movie over a mediocre movie. Definitively, this is worse than the original. But in my heart, I think it's more fun. Is it as scary? Not really. Is it as tense? Not really. But boy, is it a show.
Those woods belong to something else.
All right, now we have Pet Sematary from 2019, and this is not really a remake of the original movie, but more a new adaptation of the book, but also just kind of a remake of the original movie. So yeah, this one is directed by Dennis Widmeyer and Kevin Rolsch, and written by Jeff Bueller. Because this is based on the original, all the original characters are back. Judd is played by fucking John Lithgow. All right. Lewis is played by Jason Clarke. Rachel Amy Simets. Ellie Jete Lawrence. Gage, Hugo, and Lucas Lavoie. They're twins. And then Church the Cat. This time I do have wonderful information on the cat actors. Church the Cat had basically 5 actors. One of them was kind of fired, so to speak. Not really, but not used because he was just too scaled. So there were 2 understudies basically, and then 2 main cats that played Church. Tonic played the lovable family version before death, and then Leo played Church after death, the scary little Church. And they're adorable, and I'm gonna say something to you that I mean full-heartedly. I found out that the cat actor Leo died shortly after this movie. And that genuinely impacted me more, made me feel more than the entirety of this movie. I don't think this is terrible. I kind of feel that it's on par to the original in some ways. It does a little bit better at some things, but it also does worse at various things. So the thing that kind of made me the most upset with this one is the burial grounds. I guess in the book it was originally like the Wendigo had something to do with it, and so this movie kind of tries to do that. So the Wendigo, I believe, is technically there. You hear him, you see him in the background a little bit, which is fine, I guess. But what really made me angry is that the burial ground is it's so fucking stupid looking. The original burial ground in Pet Sematary 1 and Pet Sematary 2 are genuinely really cool. They bulldozed the whole plot. They made this beautiful place in real scenic nature and set up like these rock formations. In this movie, it's a fucking CGI visual effects mess. It's just slop, dude. It's fucking blue. It's gross, weird, not real fog. It's genuinely awful, and I fucking hate it. I get that you are trying to make it more supernatural, but this is not the way. The other thing that they do with this one is they use animal masks. I'm not totally against the animal masks because I think the next movie actually kind of does it well. But in this movie, it feels to me as if they did it for a trailer, for the trailer specifically. They're like, oh, you know what would be creepy? Let's give the little children some animal masks. I think that'd be pretty creepy. It feels like it's just there for the sake of being creepy. Things can be there for the sake of being creepy. I mean, you look at Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers or any of these masked killers, most of them wear a mask just because it's creepy. So I don't know. It's just, it feels wrong. I guess, in this movie. Like, it just feels like it was very surface level reasoning for it, and it feels just kind of vain, I guess. What I do like about this movie is that it gives the wife, Rachel, much more to do and much more of an importance in the plot. Her sister, Zelda, is also more important. I don't even know if I talked about Zelda in the original. She has a sister who has like spinal meningitis, which makes her sick and deformed, which is not how spinal meningitis would actually look or work, by the way. But that's what they use in the movie and in the book, I think. So, whatever. Basically, it just means that Rachel is traumatized by death because her sister Zelda died when she was there, and she feels bad about it because she always kind of prayed that her sister would die because she didn't like looking at her or taking care of her because her parents left her alone with Zelda. Once again, they kind of utilize this more just so they can get a little bit more scares and more tense stuff, which honestly I'm kind of fine with because this is kind of the first time where I'm like, "Oh, you're doing stuff that's actually kind of creepy and actually trying to be a little bit more scary." It does have the vibes of like some modern mediocre horror where the scares are kind of like expected, they're kind of generic, but I do appreciate that they are at least amping it up, and I like seeing Rachel have more of an importance in the story because in the original she's basically useless, let's be honest here. I also like that this movie is somewhat self-aware of the fact that people know the original. They set up this whole scene. Again, it's a pretty solidly tense where the truck is coming and it's going to hit the kid. However, Lewis is able to save Gage and the truck instead hits Ellie. So Ellie is the one that dies in this one, which I thought was a fun little twist. I thought it was good. There's another scene later on where in the original movie kills Judd when he goes to look under a bed and she like cuts his Achilles tendon basically. And Judd in this one kind of goes to do the same thing. And you're like, oh, well, they're just gonna copy the kill because he goes to look at the bed, but he's smarter than that and he kicks the bed like away and it doesn't happen. And so he goes to go downstairs and you get a pretty solid jump scare where she jams the scalpel into his tendon, Achilles tendon, and just pulls it out. And so, even though the method is the same, I still thought it was fun, and I liked that they were aware of people knowing the original and played off of that a little bit. The last thing I'll say is that some of the characters I think are better in this one and some are worse. I think Ellie's fine. There's something to me that's more upsetting and frightening about the original Gage in the first movie than Ellie in this one. It might just be because of age, like Ellie is older, so I'm kind of more used to seeing that age of character be played as like scary or demonistic in some sense. My letdown was John Lithgow as Judd. Just not as much personality, not as much character. I didn't enjoy this Judd. I much preferred the original. And then Lewis, played by Jason Clarke, acting 10 times better, in my personal opinion. Sometimes his Australian accent slips out and you're like, whoa, did I hear that right? And then I played it back. Yeah, I heard that right. Pet Sematary 2019, it's okay. It's a decent take on the material, I suppose, but ultimately I do think the original is better.
Believe me when I say, sometimes dead is better.
And then finally, we have Pet Sematary Bloodlines from 2023. This is directed by Lindsay Anderson Beer and is written by Lindsay Anderson Beer, but also Jeff Bueller, who wrote the 2019 movie. I could kind of see that in here, but the Bloodlines is because it's going back in the past and we're looking at Judd's childhood. Judd is played by Jackson White. His dad, Dan, is played by Henry Thomas, which I fucking love Henry Thomas, by the way. Mike Flanagan regular. As soon as I saw him, I was like, wow, I love that guy, so I was excited to see him. There's a guy named Manny, played by Forrest Goodluck. He was in The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which I loved, and I loved him in that. He does really good here as well. Manny's sister Donna, played by Isabella Starr LeBlanc. There's Timmy, played by Jack Mulhern. Norma, played by Natalie Allen Lind. And we get a dog named Hendrix. I think I mixed up the name of the dog somehow, I think. So we have a dog named Hendrix in this one, played by the wonderful, beautiful dog actor Jelly Bean. And Jelly Bean, fun fact, is completely deaf and has 3 Guinness World Records. Can we just, the round of applause for Jelly Bean and all of the pet actors in these movies. They all do such a great job, and I'm so proud of them, and I love all of them. So I'm about to make a reference that most people aren't going to understand. Pet Sematary Bloodlines feels like it has the vibes and the essence that the TV show The Winchesters has in comparison to Supernatural. Now, The Winchesters is, of course, the reboot, like, spin-off that goes back in time to John Winchester, the father of Sam and Dean Winchester. Let me be blunt. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, y'all. In fact, I enjoy certain aspects of that vibe. All I'm saying is, this does feel like a reboot that is kind of technically a spin-off that goes back in the past to some degree and has like this general vibe and air of, I don't know how to describe it, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that vibe. Do I like everything they do with it? No. Do they fall short? A lot of times, yes. So it's a hit and miss, sometimes pretty good, sometimes pretty bad. That's all I'm going to say. This is basically a prequel to 2019's Pet Sematary. They make some retcons in this one that kind of suck. One that kind of confused me is in the Pet Sematary, you see a grave for Biffer, who was Judd's dog. And in previous movies, Judd talks about how Biffer was put down and then he buried Biffer. Biffer came back, and then Biffer eventually, was put down again. But that doesn't make sense, because if we're seeing Biffer's grave now, and this is the movie that shows the first time we see the dead come back, according to Judd's perspective, that doesn't add up. So yeah, I kind of like this one. It feels like a cool little period piece, sort of, because it goes back in time to sometime in the 1960s, I believe, during the Vietnam War is happening. One of the friends, Timmy, got back from the war. I like that there's also Native American representation. Finally, thank God. It took a little too long, but we finally have some official, genuine, real Native representation in one of these movies. And I like that they explain it a little better, and they kind of are like, actually, the whole Indian burial ground trope, not great. So basically, the Pet Sematary, the actual Pet Sematary where they bury pets, is the burial grounds that the natives used to kind of use animal spirits to help ward against the actual evil, which is the actual burial ground, or whatever they call it in this one, where the dead comes back. And I think that this explanation is much better. I like how it's portrayed, and I like that there's actual native representation, and the characters are all pretty great. That is like the major plus I have in this movie, is that I think all of the characters are pretty good. There are some side characters that are nothing. They're there to die, basically, but whatever. So basically, to explain, Timmy, Manny, and Judd were all friends. Timmy went off to Vietnam. Timmy died in Vietnam. Timmy's dad buries him, and Timmy comes back to life, unbeknownst to everyone else. So Judd and Manny's sister Donna, who is also part of this friend group basically, are all dealing with a weird acting Timmy. And then slowly Timmy tries to kill them. Honestly, there's a pretty great backstory behind all of this, behind it all, and I think it's pretty cool. But now I have to talk about the things that really upset me. They retcon how the dead work in this movie. Number one, apparently, all of a sudden, you have to aim for the eyes to put down the dead. There's a guy or someone that says, like, you gotta aim for the eyes to end it for good. I'm like, no the fuck you don't, huh? What are you talking about, son? This has never once been a rule applied to the dead. Why are we applying it now? They just kind of needlessly complicated things. And honestly, in the movie, it doesn't even, like, there's not even really a reason for it. There's not a reason for making it more difficult to put down the dead. Even when you're looking at the scenes where the dead are being taken care of or dispatched, it is realistically like a struggle until someone eye shot or whatever. Just let them struggle normally because they're dead, so they're gonna have a little bit of an advantage. I don't get it. But also, seemingly the dead can like fucking low-key teleport and or have just increased speed than a human would be capable of. There's a scene where Donna gets turned where she is dead and Judd's girlfriend is running away from her, and fucking Donna, I don't know how else to explain it other than teleports. Donna teleports to a place where she should not be able to be. That was some bullshit, let me tell you. And apparently they're just like capable of digging really extravagant tunnel systems and kind of breathe underwater. And it's just like, what are you doing? Stop. You know how I talked about the animal masks in the previous one? How it felt like they were just there to make it like superficially more scary? That's what it felt like here. It felt like they did a bunch of stuff just to make it superficially more scary. Like the tunnel system that Timmy dug out, it felt like that was there just so they'd have some creepy set piece to use. Whereas the burial ground pissed me off in 2019, the actual representation of the dead pissed me off in this one, and I didn't love it. But now it's time for my final ranking of the movies. And you might be able to put this together if you're paying attention, but here is my official ranking of the Pet Sematary movies. Coming in fourth place, aka last place, we have Pet Sematary from 2019. I just don't feel like it improved enough in certain aspects for it to really elevate itself above any of the others. It did do some things better. I did like things about it. It wasn't a wholly bad movie. It just kind of let me down, and it kind of just wasn't, I don't know. It hurts because it's not as original, and it just did some things that I didn't love as much. Coming in at third place, we have Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Once again, I actually really, really like parts of this movie. In fact, I think this one might have some of my favorite segments, some of my favorite stuff, but it was really the ending and the portrayal of the dead that just really brought it down for me because it just didn't feel good. It had really high highs for me and really low lows that just dragged it down for me, and I feel bad about it, but it's my list, it's my ranking, that's how it has to be. And then coming in at second place, we have the original Pet Sematary, making Pet Sematary 2 my favorite of the movies. Yeah, I just, like I said, the original honestly wasn't that exciting of a watch. It was kind of mediocre at points. The acting wasn't that great except for Judd, who I loved, and the cat, of course. Yeah, it was just kind of a letdown. There were some things that I liked, some great tense moments, some good sequences, especially towards the end. But it just kind of fell short, in my opinion. It wasn't the most fun watch, which, by the way, horror movies don't have to be fun. It can just be scary or really realistic and deep and dark. I just didn't feel like it even succeeded in doing that all that well either. Which means Pet Sematary 2 is my favorite, mostly because I think it's just ridiculous. And I'd rather watch it because it's more fun and it has stuff that I think I was like, whoa, that's cool and that's really fun, and I was enjoying myself watching it. Whereas with the original, I did enjoy myself sometimes, but other times I was like, it's fine. It's fine. Is all of Pet Sematary 2 good? No, by far, absolutely not. But um, I think of the four, it is my favorite. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you like me doing this type of thing where I talk about like just a franchise instead of doing a big whole collection of movies. I kind of want to do more videos like this. So I hope you enjoyed. And if you want to see more like this, let me know. There are plenty of other series franchises I can look at. And let me know what you think I should do or look at. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. And I'll see you in the next video. And just between you and me, sometimes dead is better.